Hi everyone, I'm really excited to talk to you about mulching today. I think this lecture may be the most important one that I teach because no matter what type of plants you're growing, in what type of environment, mulching can increase your plant health and reduce water loss. That means that you have to water your plants less often. Mulching comes in many different forms, such as this plastic mulch that you see in this strawberry field, to this wood mulch that you see around this landscape. Mulch can be used for a very practical reason, such as reducing weeds, or it can be used for aesthetic pleasure. Mulch is very important if you're going to garden because it helps reduce water loss around your plants and increases soil health. These are some pictures that I took near Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This is a farm that grows all their own food for their restaurants. After today's talk, you'll be able to explain what mulching is and list and explain 5 advantages of mulching. You'll probably actually know more after today. You'll also be able to list the types of materials that can be used for mulching and their pros and cons. You'll then be better equipped to know what type of mulch you'll want to use for your plants. Mulching is not something that horticulturists invented. It's something that's found in nature. This is a picture of my teacher, Yuri, explaining to me how mulching can increase plant health. Yuri explained that mulch is found in nature and that we can learn from nature to do the same for our plants growing in pots or in our garden or in our yard. As you walk through the forest, Yuri explained that there is mulch in the forest floor. That mulch is there to preserve moisture and also keep organisms such as microorganisms that are decomposing that organic matter to increase soil nutrition healthy. It's acting as a shade to reduce water loss and keep the soil insulated. Mulch has so many important uses in horticulture, and we can see these in nature as well. Mulch is any material spread on the surface of the soil to conserve soil moisture, control weeds, or influence soil temperature. There's lots of advantages of mulching, and we're going to cover a few of these. First of all, water conservation. If the mulch is on top of the soil, the water is less likely to evaporate and be lost to the environment. That means you have to water your plants less often. Using mulch in potted plants can really help you have to water those less often. Same goes for your garden and your plants in your yard in landscapes. It also helps with weed control. Weeding is something none of us want to do. So we need to put mulch out, which reduces weed growth. It also can modify the temperatures. If you're in a cold environment, mulch can increase your soil temperature throughout the winter, increasing the health of your plant in the springtime. It also reduces the labor requirements for growing plants. For instance, you'll have to weed less and water less. Having mulch on the surface of the soil also keeps your fruit and vegetables clean. Since they won't have direct contact with the soil, they're less likely to get pathogens. Having mulch also reduces insect pests. And it's aesthetically pleasing to have mulch around your plants. And it protects the plants from damage. As you can see, this tree has exposed roots. This can be dangerous for a few different reasons. It can trip you while you're walking in your yard, but it also can hurt the tree. If the lawnmower blade goes over these roots, it can damage the roots and leave an open wound. Open wounds are prone to infection, so it can damage the plant health. You should mulch around trees to protect the roots. Now that we've covered the many important reasons to mulch, let's cover how to mulch correctly. This is an example of bad mulching, and this is an example of good mulching. Let's take a closer look to see what's going on here. When you pile up the mulch into a pile around the tree, this is bad. We want it to instead be a bowl formation. This is because mulch is very good at conserving moisture, holding in that moisture. We want to hold moisture into the soil, but we do not want to hold that moisture around the base of the tree. When moisture is right around the base of the tree, as is shown in this picture, that can cause this tree to rot, and the moisture makes the bark more soft, and that can increase insect pests. So we do not want this volcano mulching. We don't want a pile of mulch around the base of the tree, or your shrubs, or any plant for that matter. Instead, we want to visibly be able to see the base of the tree or the base of the plant. That way, when it rains, the water will be able to directly enter the soil instead of rolling off this big mound that we've created. It's really good if you create kind of a bowl formation because then the water will be conserved right there. Again, you do not want to mound up the mulch. You want the base of the tree to be visible or the base of your plants to be visible, and you want to go at this angle for the mulch to be helpful to the plant rather than harmful. What kind of materials can you use for mulch? There's lots of different ones, and we're going to go over the pros and cons of each. There's lots of organic types of mulch that you can use and inorganic. Let's get started. You can use grass clippings and leaves as mulch. This is what they use in nature. This is what you see in the forest floor. The advantages of using grass clippings and leaves is inexpensive and readily available. But the disadvantage is it tends to mat down and can reduce water and airflow. It may also contain herbicide residue depending on where you got that cut grass, and it can also blow away. An alternative is using compost. Compost is often made by composting grass and leaves. An advantage for using compost to mulch is it supplies nutrients to the plant, and you can make your own, and it's usually inexpensive and readily available, depending on where you live. A disadvantage to using compost is that it should not be hot compost. The microorganisms should not still be breaking down the compost at very high rates. If you can tell compost is hot by simply touching the compost, if it's very hot to touch, then it might be too hot to use around your plants. Hot compost, however, is very good at killing weeds. So if you have an area that you want to kill the weeds, use hot compost around those. But if you have a plant that you don't want to kill, make sure to create some space between that plant and the hot compost. Compost is biodegradable, so it needs to be re-added to the soil surface as a mulch year after year. Depending on your situation, you might have to add it every other year. You can also use straw or hay to mulch around plants. This is especially good if you're trying to grow new grass in your yard. An advantage is it's inexpensive and readily available. Some disadvantages is it has a lot of carbon, so it can cause nitrogen deficiency in your plant. Again, you remember that microorganisms that are decomposing in the soil need nitrogen and carbon to do the decomposition process. If they're given a lot of carbon, they'll need to steal the nitrogen from somewhere. Wood chips are a very common mulching material in landscapes. Their advantage is they're attractive and they last a long time. Some disadvantages is that they can wash away. Since they're wood, they float, and they can tie up nitrogen if the wood chips are incorporated into the soil. Again, those same microorganisms will use that carbon to decompose, but they also need to steal nitrogen from somewhere. If the wood chips are just on top of the soil, however, you won't have this problem. Pine needles are another great material to be used as a mulch. This is especially common in the eastern United States, but can be used other places. Some advantages of using pine needles are that they decompose slowly, and as they do that, they acidify the soil. That can also be seen as a disadvantage since you don't want your soil to become too acidic, but certain plants are quite tolerant to this. Some disadvantage is it has limited availability in lots of parts of the world, and it can mat down. Sphagnum or peat moss, which we learned previously is a controversial ingredient in potting mixes, can also be used as a mulch, mainly used in potted plants. This may also acidify the soil over time, but it does decompose slowly. Some disadvantages is it repels water when it's dry. It's difficult to re-wet. It's expensive, and it's not sustainable. You can also use rice hulls to mulch around plants. Some advantages are it's attractive and it improves soil health. Some disadvantage is it's light and fluffy, and it's only available in certain regions. You can also use newspapers in your garden to mulch. Some advantages is it's very cheap and readily available, and it's recycled material. It's very good at holding moisture in the soil, and as the newspaper decomposes, it can help improve soil health. The disadvantages are it's considered not aesthetically pleasing, and it can blow away. If you're using this, you want to hold it down in some way. You can also use shredded newspaper, which can sometimes be hard to get in large quantities. Now we're going to talk about inorganic mulches, such as crushed rock or gravel. These are very aesthetically pleasing mulches to use. They give a formal look to your landscape. However, there's some disadvantages. For instance, white rock near buildings will warm the building, and the plants around that rock can also have a higher temperature, which can be damaging to their growth. These rocks can also be a safety hazard when they're run over by lawnmowers, because the lawnmowers can basically take them in, can damage your lawnmower, or they can also project them and it could hit somebody that's nearby. Lava rock, as shown here, has a pretty round shape, so if you're using it on a slope, it can be pretty bad because it will roll away. All of these rocks are generally more expensive than bark. That being said, though, they are rocks, so they last a lot longer, but you may need to add more every few years. Landscape fabrics can be very helpful when you're mulching. You can put the landscape fabric before the mulch, directly on the soil, and then secure the mulching fabric and then put your mulch on. That way the weeds are less likely to grow through your mulch, so that you don't have to weed so much. Advantages of landscaping fabric: it's good control of weeds, and it does allow water to penetrate the soil. And most of these, depending on what grade you buy, is quite durable. Some disadvantages is it may degrade in light and can be seen as unattractive. That's why I usually cover it with another mulch. And certain plants, such as nutgrass, can still penetrate, and that will make it so that you still have to weed that area. Weeds can still grow on top of the fabric, but it's less likely that there'll be weed seeds in the mulch that you're using, so you'll want to be careful of that. Plastic mulch is very common in fruit and vegetable production. Some advantages are it's inexpensive and it keeps weeds down very well. It can also be used by organic growers and conventional growers to keep weeds down. It's usually removed at the end of the season or when the plant is harvested. Some disadvantages is throughout the year when people, the farmers and horticulturists, are in the field or in the garden, it can be damaged by them or equipment. Or just can be cracks or shatters in the plastic from extreme temperatures. And this plastic does not allow water penetration. So you don't want to plastic your whole area, or else water won't be able to get to your plants. It's very labor intensive to put this plastic mulch down, so that can be a disadvantage as well. It can also be harmful to the environment once it's removed and put in the landfill. They do, however, make biodegradable plastic mulch, which has the added advantage of eliminating need for removal every season, so less labor is required. Some disadvantages: it's more expensive than conventional plastic, and it's not approved for organic crop production because as it biodegrades, some of those compounds can be released to the environment, which may not be considered as organic for growers. Another inorganic mulch that is used is rubber mulches. These are made from recycled tires usually. Some advantage is they're very decorative, there's lots of colors, and they don't decompose, and they're made out of recycled materials. However, they're very expensive and they can still have a rubbery smell. So rubber mulches do not decompose, so if you ever want to remove them, you have to put a lot of labor to remove it, since this is a product that is not going to be biodegrade naturally. For example, if you want to change the color of your mulch in your yard and you've been using a rubber mulch, say you want to go from blue to this brown. This blue you're going to have to gather up because it's not ever going to biodegrade. In contrast, if you use, say, a very brown mulch and you use a bark mulch, a wood chip mulch, and you want to change to black, this brown is going to biodegrade over time, so you can usually just cover it with this black wood mulch and you won't have a problem. So you have to take that into consideration when you use rubber mulches. Let's conclude with what we've covered today. We've talked a lot about the pros of mulching. Mulching is very good for the environment because it conserves water, and better for the horticulturists since they'll have to irrigate less often. This is essential because agriculture uses 70% of the water worldwide. We want to preserve our water resource, so we want to mulch to conserve water. Mulching also helps with weed control, temperature modification, reduces labor requirements, and keeps fruit clean and reduces insects. It also increases the aesthetics of our plants and protects them from harm. I want you to take the time to answer these questions. Explain what mulch is. List and explain 5 advantages of mulching. We just went over quite the list. List the types of materials that can be used for mulching and their pros and cons. In your own words, explain why volcano mulching is harmful to plants, especially to trees. No matter where you're growing plants, consider what you could use for mulch. It'll depend on what's in your area, so do research about what people are using to mulch in your area. Mulching is incredibly important for preserving our environment and increasing our soil health. I hope that you have a great day. Feel free to comment or email me with questions.